One quiet decision you made years ago may already have locked in the rest of your life. Not a dramatic moment, not a crisis, just a choice you barely noticed, yet it's still deciding where you'll end up. Welcome to American Wall Street. Before we go any further, if you value deep thinking, uncomfortable truths, and ideas that can actually change the direction of your life, subscribe to the channel and support us. It helps us continue creating videos that don't just motivate you for a moment, but stay with you long after the video ends. Now let's begin. Most people think changing their life requires a big event. Quitting a job, moving to a new city, starting a business, ending a relationship. But those events are not what change a life. They are only the visible consequences. The real turning point always happens earlier, and it's almost invisible. Your life is not a collection of moments. It is a trajectory. Right now, your life is moving in a specific direction, shaped by decisions you've already made, what you tolerate, what you delay, what you avoid, what you repeatedly say yes to. If nothing changes, time will keep moving, and you will arrive at a destination that is already predictable. Not because you chose it consciously, but because you didn't interrupt the path. This is what most people miss. Life doesn't change because time passes. Life changes only when a decision forces you to act differently, consistently enough to alter the direction you're moving in. A single decision can be enough, not because it's dramatic, but because it compounds. Think of it like driving on a highway. If you keep going straight, you will reach the city ahead, whether you like it or not. Changing your life doesn't mean driving faster or working harder. It means taking a turn. And the quality of your life depends entirely on where and when you choose to turn. This is why motivation fades, habits break, and resolutions fail. They try to add effort without questioning direction. But effort on the wrong road only gets you to the wrong destination faster. The uncomfortable truth is this: many people are exhausted not because life is hard, but because they are living a life shaped by outdated decisions. Decisions made out of fear, convenience, or survival, long after those reasons stop being valid. So the real question is not, how do I change my life? The real question is, what decision am I avoiding that would change my trajectory if I made it today? That is where everything begins. Before we move on, here's a quick question for you. Please answer in the comments to join the conversation. Question: which do you believe shapes your future more right now? A, the effort you put in every day. B, the decisions you delay making. Comment A or B below. Most people don't suffer from a lack of intelligence, talent, or ambition. They suffer from a lack of space. Space to think clearly, space to step back, space to ask the kinds of questions that never get answered in the middle of a busy life. This is where the idea of a think day becomes powerful. A think day is not a productivity hack, and it is not a self-care ritual. It is a deliberate interruption of momentum. It is the act of stepping off the treadmill long enough to decide whether you are even running in the right direction. For most people, life moves too fast for this to happen accidentally. If you don't schedule time to think, you will default to reacting. The inspiration comes from the concept of a think week, famously used by Bill Gates, where he would disappear for days at a time to read, reflect, and make long-term decisions. But the deeper insight is not the duration, it is the intent. You don't need a cabin in the woods or an entire week away from responsibility. What you need is a container, a protected window of time where nothing is demanded from you except clarity. That container can be 4 hours. 4 hours is long enough to break out of surface-level thinking and short enough to be realistic. During that time, you are not allowed to check email, respond to messages, or optimize anything. You are there to think about your life as a system, not as a list of tasks. This is the difference between being busy and being strategic. A think day compresses what would normally take months of background anxiety into a single focused session. Instead of carrying unresolved questions in your head about your work, your health, your relationships, you place them on the table and look at them directly. You stop negotiating with yourself and start deciding. The goal of a think day is not to generate dozens of ideas. That creates noise. The goal is to identify 1 or 2 decisions with disproportionate impact. Decisions that, if made clearly and followed through, would make many other problems irrelevant. These are leverage points. When you hit them, the system shifts. This is why a think day can be worth more than weeks of effort. Effort compounds only when direction is correct. Without direction, effort is just motion. What makes this approach effective is its honesty. You are not trying to impress anyone. You are not chasing motivation. You are creating a moment where excuses lose their power because you are no longer distracted. A think day is not about escaping your life. It is about finally choosing it, consciously, intentionally, and on your terms. There is a reason why life-changing decisions rarely happen at your desk, in your bedroom, or in the places where you spend most of your time. It's not because those places are bad. It's because your mind has already learned how to behave there. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly scans for familiar patterns so it can conserve energy. When you wake up in the same room, sit in the same chair, and follow the same routine, your thoughts quietly fall into pre-existing grooves. You begin thinking the same thoughts, worrying about the same problems, and reaching the same conclusions, not because they are correct, but because they are familiar. This is the invisible force that keeps people stuck. In familiar environments, your identity feels fixed. You unconsciously reinforce the story of who you are, what you do, and what you're capable of. Even when you want change, your surroundings whisper reminders of the past, the roles you play, the expectations others have of you, the habits you've built. Over time, these signals become so constant that you stop noticing them. Stepping into a new environment disrupts that loop. When you go somewhere you haven't been before, your mind shifts from autopilot to awareness. You pay attention, you notice details, you slow down, and in that state, you naturally gain distance from your life. This distance is not emotional detachment, it is perspective. It allows you to observe your choices instead of being trapped inside them. Think of it as rising above the noise. When you are immersed in daily life, every problem feels urgent. Every emotion feels justified. But when you remove yourself from the context that generates those emotions, you begin to see which problems are structural and which are merely reactions. Many concerns lose their intensity. Others reveal themselves as symptoms of deeper misalignment. This is why thinking harder inside your normal routine rarely works. You are asking the same system that created your current results to generate something fundamentally new. Without changing the inputs, the outputs remain the same. A change in environment creates cognitive contrast. It gives your mind something unfamiliar to process, which weakens old assumptions and opens space for new conclusions. You stop asking, "How do I manage this?" and start asking, "Why am I living this way at all?" The power of leaving your comfort zone during a think day is not about discomfort. It is about clarity. When you are no longer surrounded by reminders of who you've been, you give yourself permission to consider who you could become. And that permission is often the first step toward a decision that truly changes your trajectory. Before you can change direction, you need to know where you actually are. Not where you think you are, not where you hope you are, but where your life truly stands when you strip away excuses, comparisons, and optimism. This is where most people avoid looking. The wheel of life is not a motivational exercise. It is a diagnostic tool. Think of it as taking a CT scan of your life instead of relying on how you feel on a good or bad day. Feelings fluctuate. Patterns do not. When you step back and examine your life across its core domains, health, work, relationships, and joy, you begin to see something uncomfortable but incredibly useful: imbalance. Some areas quietly carry your entire life forward, while others lag behind, draining energy in ways you've normalized over time. Physical health, mental health, spiritual grounding, purpose, income, growth, family, friendships, intimacy, and finally, joy, the most neglected category of all. When you rate each area honestly on a scale from 1 to 10, you are forced to confront reality without narrative. Numbers have a way of cutting through self-deception. What matters most is not the score itself. A 6 is not a failure. An 8 is not a success. What matters is contrast. A life where one domain is a 9 and another is a 4 is a life under tension. Over time, that tension expresses itself as stress, dissatisfaction, or the vague sense that something is off, even when things appear fine on the surface. This exercise reveals leverage. Most people try to improve everything at once and end up changing nothing. The Wheel of Life shows you where a single decision could create a ripple effect. Improving physical health might raise energy, confidence, and focus. Repairing friendships might restore joy and emotional stability. Clarifying purpose might make money and growth problems easier to solve. The mistake is thinking that all problems deserve equal attention. They don't. Some areas act as bottlenecks. As long as they remain neglected, progress elsewhere feels heavier than it should. What makes this process powerful is its honesty. You are no longer guessing why you feel stuck. You can see it. You can point to it. And once you can name it, you can make decisions with intention rather than frustration. The wheel of life does not tell you what to do next. It tells you where your attention has the highest return. And that clarity transforms a think day from abstract reflection into a focused search for the one decision that actually matters right now. There is a moment in every think day when reflection stops being comfortable. It happens when you ask a single question and feel resistance immediately. Not confusion, but resistance. That reaction is the signal that you are close to something important. The question is simple. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? Most people answer it faster than they expect. The response appears almost instinctively, before logic has time to interfere. It might be a career move you've postponed for years, a conversation you've avoided, a creative pursuit you've buried under responsibility, or a version of your life you quietly believe is not realistic. The answer is rarely surprising. What's surprising is how quickly the mind rushes in to shut it down. This question is powerful because it exposes the real constraint shaping your life. Not lack of ability, not lack of opportunity. Fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of instability, fear of regret. Fear disguises itself as practicality, but its function is protection, not truth. By temporarily removing the possibility of failure, you bypass your internal risk management system. You see what remains when fear is no longer allowed to vote. What remains is desire, clean, unfiltered, and often long suppressed. This is not wishful thinking. It is information. It tells you where your intuition has been trying to lead you. The follow-up question is where the work begins. If this is what I would do, why am I not doing it? The answer is almost never because it's wrong. It is because you are afraid of what might happen if it doesn't work. Afraid of losing money, status, approval, or control. Afraid of discovering that you are not who you hoped you were. These fears are deeply human, but when left unexamined, they quietly dictate your future. This question does not demand that you act immediately. It demands honesty. It draws a clear line between what you want and what you are willing to risk. And once that line is visible, you can no longer pretend you don't see it. Many people spend years optimizing a life they never consciously chose. This question interrupts that pattern. It forces you to acknowledge the gap between your current trajectory and your true inclinations. Even if you don't act right away, something shifts. You can't unsee the direction your life would take if fear were no longer in control. The purpose of this question is not to eliminate fear. Fear will always exist. The purpose is to prevent fear from being the sole author of your decisions. When you know what you would do without fear, every future choice becomes clearer. You are no longer guessing. You are deciding, fully aware of what you are choosing and what you are not. Fear is persuasive because it speaks in absolutes. Inside your head, it rarely presents itself as a suggestion. It presents itself as certainty. If you take this risk, everything will fall apart. If you try and fail, the damage will be permanent. If you lose, you will not recover. When fear remains unexamined, it becomes the loudest voice in the room. Fear setting exists to take that voice off the throne. The problem is not that fear is irrational. The problem is that fear is vague. It thrives in ambiguity. As long as the worst-case scenario is undefined, your mind fills the gap with catastrophic imagery. The moment you force yourself to describe it in detail, fear begins to shrink. Fear setting starts by asking a question most people avoid. What is the absolute worst thing that could realistically happen if I did this? Not the emotional exaggeration, not the dramatic collapse, but the real, concrete outcome. Would it truly end your life? Would it permanently destroy your future? Or would it simply be painful, embarrassing, inconvenient, or expensive for a period of time? When you continue the exercise, something interesting happens. You begin to separate impact from permanence. Many feared outcomes feel devastating in the imagination but temporary in reality. A failed business may cost money, but money can be earned again. A wrong decision may damage confidence, but confidence can be rebuilt. Even reputational damage, so often feared, fades far faster than people expect. The next step is where fear loses even more power. Identifying recovery paths. If the worst happened, what could you do to stabilize the situation? Who could you ask for help? What skills, resources, or experiences would still remain available to you? This reframes fear from an ending into a scenario with options. Fear setting also exposes probabilities. When you are honest, you often realize that the most extreme outcomes are not only survivable, but unlikely. Your mind treats risk as binary, success or ruin. Writing it down reveals a spectrum. Most outcomes live in the middle, where adjustment is possible. What changes here is not bravery, it is orientation. You stop asking, what if everything goes wrong? And start asking, at what point would I intervene? You shift from avoidance to strategy. This is why fear setting works. It does not encourage recklessness. It encourages clarity. When fear is named, measured, and mapped, it becomes one factor among many, not the deciding one. Once fear is reduced to a problem that can be planned for, it no longer controls the trajectory of your life. You may still feel it, but it no longer decides for you. And that shift alone opens the door to choices that were previously impossible to consider. Once fear has been examined and stripped of its exaggerated power, a new challenge appears. The mind wants to drift. It wants to jump between ideas, revisit old arguments, or chase insights that feel interesting but lead nowhere. This is where structured journaling becomes essential. Journaling is not about writing beautifully or recording your day. It is a tool for directing attention. Well-designed questions act like lenses. They force your mind to look at parts of your life it usually avoids, rushes past, or rationalizes away. Without these prompts, reflection often turns into rumination, thinking in circles while feeling productive. The value of journaling prompts lies in their precision. Questions like, what would I do if money were no object? Or, if I repeated this week for the next 10 years, where would I end up? Are not philosophical for the sake of depth. They compress time, they reveal patterns, they expose the long-term consequences of short-term comfort. Some prompts focus on energy rather than goals. When you ask what activities have energized you and which have drained you, you shift attention from what looks impressive to what is sustainable. Many people build lives around activities that steadily deplete them, then wonder why motivation disappears. Energy is data. Ignoring it leads to burnout disguised as ambition. Other prompts confront identity, questions about whose desires your goals reflect, or what you wish people would say about you at the end of your life, challenge borrowed aspirations. Over time, it becomes easy to pursue goals simply because they were praised, rewarded, or expected. Journaling exposes the difference between a life that looks successful and a life that feels aligned. Some of the most uncomfortable prompts involve bottlenecks. Asking what is truly blocking your next level of progress and why you are not addressing it often reveals avoidance disguised as busyness. The answer is rarely complex. It is usually something simple, emotionally difficult, and repeatedly postponed. Then there are prompts about letting go. The question of what backpack you are carrying that no longer serves you invites reflection on outdated beliefs, grudges, identities, or fears that once protected you but now weigh you down. Growth often requires subtraction, not addition. The key is selectivity. You do not need to answer every question. In fact, trying to do so dilutes their impact. The most effective approach is to choose a small number that provoke discomfort or emotional response. That reaction signals relevance. Journaling, done this way, is not self-expression. It is self-confrontation. It turns vague dissatisfaction into specific insight. And when insight becomes clear enough, decisions stop feeling forced. They begin to feel inevitable. Reflection without commitment is comfortable, and that is exactly why it so often leads nowhere. A think day reaches its true conclusion only when thought is converted into decision, and decision is translated into action. Without that final step, insight remains abstract, and clarity fades back into routine. A decision is not a feeling. It is not motivation. It is a line drawn in time. Before this moment, things were one way. From this moment forward, they will be another. Writing that line down matters more than most people realize. It creates a psychological boundary between who you were and who you are choosing to become. Documenting a decision forces precision. When you state what you were uncertain about before today and what you have decided as of today, ambiguity loses its grip. You stop negotiating internally. You stop reopening the same debate. The decision becomes something you can point to, rather than something you endlessly reconsider. But a decision without action is only symbolic. Action is what moves the trajectory. This is why action items must be concrete, limited, and specific. Not a vague intention to work on it, but clear steps that can be taken without further thinking. The purpose of action items is not to complete the entire journey, but to make the next step unavoidable. One of the most overlooked aspects of change is follow-up. Even well-made decisions can dissolve if they are not revisited. Life has a way of pulling attention back to the urgent and familiar. Scheduling a review, whether a week or a month later, creates accountability with yourself. It allows space to assess whether the decision still feels aligned after emotion has settled and reality has intervened. This review is not about judging yourself. It is about recalibration. Some decisions strengthen with time. Others reveal the need for adjustment. What matters is that you are now responding to data rather than doubt. True change rarely feels dramatic in the moment. Often, it feels quiet, almost underwhelming. But over time, the compound effect becomes undeniable. A single decision, consistently honored, begins to reshape habits, priorities, and identity. The Think Day is not a ritual you perform once and forget. It is a practice that trains you to live deliberately. Each time you repeat it, you become more skilled at recognizing leverage, confronting fear, and acting with clarity. In the end, the goal is not to design a perfect life. The goal is to stop living on autopilot. When you choose your actions consciously and review them honestly, you reclaim authorship over your future. And that, more than any single outcome, is what it truly means to change your life. Changing your life is not about dramatic moves or constant effort. It is about creating space to think, seeing your life clearly, confronting fear honestly, and making decisions you no longer avoid. A Think Day teaches you that clarity comes before action and direction matters more than speed. When you step outside your routine, examine where you truly stand, and face what you would do without fear, you regain control over your trajectory. Life does not change because you wish it to. It changes when you decide, clearly, consciously, and with follow-through. Deep lesson in how to apply it. The deepest lesson is this: most people are not stuck because they lack options, but because they delay decisions. To apply this, start small but intentional. Schedule time to think without distractions. Identify one area of life that feels misaligned. Ask yourself what decision you are avoiding. Write down the fear and choose one concrete action to test forward movement. Revisit it after a week. Progress begins with ownership. Question for you: do you believe the biggest obstacle in your life right now is fear or lack of clarity? Please comment your answer below so everyone can learn from different perspectives. If this video added value to you, kindly subscribe to the channel to support American Wall Street and help us continue creating meaningful content in future videos.